Hello, and welcome to The Bard's Truth with your host, The Green Bard. This is our HotD review of Season 1, Episode 1 of House of the Dragon. This is going to be my first of many reviews of House of the Dragon. I welcome you to my channel if you're new. If you're already a subscriber, I love that you're coming here for this content. I also want to mention that I'm going to be doing a video with Old New Dude coming up, and that ought to be fun. We'll be talking about Eddard, so check that out over on Old New Dude's YouTube channel. In these reviews, we'll do our best to try to analyze what went right and what went wrong. We'll of course be considering the episode against the written work, especially Fire and Blood. But we'll also be talking about what I think could have been done better and what went right within the episode, regardless of the book. So immediately I think we started off on the wrong foot though. They eliminated one of the old King Jaehaerys' sons, Vagon, who had become a maester. It doesn't seem that there was really any reason they did so though. Doesn't make sense. You change the book canon for no reason. It's only going to cause you problems later on. Gotta wonder why they had to do that. However, they got it right with Rhaenys' reaction to her cousin Viserys being named the old king's heir. They do deviate from the book canon by not mentioning that actually it was Rhaenys' son Laenor who the council had given the most votes to, not Rhaenys herself. So it was even more lopsided against females in the actual council. And they chose to breeze over this and make it sound like the council had considered the female directly against the male heir. In the end, the council had actually just chosen between two males because they discarded the female even earlier. So we'll try to speed this up. I think they got the size of Syrax a little bit wrong. Syrax shouldn't be that big at this point. Rhaenyra is very young, and Syrax would have been hatched as her cradle egg. But they did get it right that she would love to ride her dragon. I also think they really got it right as far as her relationship with her mother. It was really well done. Both actresses hit this one nail on the head. And then they also got it right with Corlys Velaryon. He really had a presence in the small council room, even though he was generally not given his due by his fellow council members, such as Viserys, and I think they got it wrong. Viserys wouldn't have completely ignored Corlys, but his hand Otto Hightower may have summarily dismissed the entire matter, though. I also think that the idea that Daemon would just skip the small council meetings is kind of absurd. I think that this was just a cheap way for them to try to make it seem like he's the rogue prince. And then putting him on the Iron Throne, that's the first time we see him. Again, I don't think that's the right way to introduce the character. Showing him fighting in the streets or something, that might have worked, but showing him usurping his brother's place with treason, that's silly. I do think they got the rest of the scene between Rhaenyra and Daemon right, though. To me, he's being a good uncle in this scene, although some are suggesting it was some kind of grooming, which I find that also to be silly. So here they've changed it so that Rhaenyra and Alicent were friends at some point. That's not in the books, but I actually don't mind the change. Seems to work. And then there's the Maester conspiracy. Some of you folks may or may not know about it, but basically the Maesters are headquartered in Old Town, and so is the Faith, and it seems like those two entities, plus House Hightower, which of course has taken up the Handship, all of those forces seem to be working against the dragons in several different instances throughout history, and so we call that the Old Town conspiracy. And this scene here was just kind of an example of exactly what that is. It seems to me like the Maesters are really deferring to Lord Hightower and conspiring against Viserys. So in this scene with Viserys and Aemma, I think what they got right is the patriarchy. Viserys is leading her to have another son. He says he's had a dream about it. He may or may not have had a dream. But he says he knows the sex of the son, and I think we know from Rhaegar's schemes he wouldn't have known the sex of the son that was coming in Jon Snow, because he probably expected a Visenya and not an Aemon, as many of us believe Jon Snow's actual name is. So, I think that when it comes to it, if anybody were to have a vision, and this goes back to my dragon theories as well, if anybody were to have a vision of the child, it would be the woman, Emma, who had the child inside of her, who had an actual connection to that baby, rather than Viserys. Going back to my theories on Dany, she had the dreams of Drogon when the egg was in the next room. So I think that's a pretty good clue that it's the Targaryen females, not the males, that know about the babies to come. Obviously, Dany's children being Drogon and his two brethren, Viserion and Rhaegal. Very well acted by both actors, though. They got that right as well. Emma's portrayal of having mourned all the dead children she can, that was powerful. Wow. So then, interesting, definitely the Gold Cloaks loved Daemon. But then that scene of them cheering him on and all that before the slaughter was probably right. The maiming and the mob justice, I put that in the WTF category. That was interesting. I think they wanted to have blood and guts. If Daemon did that, it wasn't in a big mob scene. It was over time establishing fear of the Gold Cloaks. I'm sure he did that. I think it was kind of cartoonish, though, the way it was in the actual show. Especially when we talk about the horse-carried wagon full of body parts. That was something. But Daemon being pragmatic in the follow-up scene in the small council, our city should be safe for all its people. Yeah, I think they got that right. And he also, I'll say, I think he had a grin very similar to Thorin Oakenshield from The Hobbit, the actor who was having a little bit of an evil moment when he wanted that Arkenstone. He put a very similar look on his face as Daemon does here, so kudos to Matt Smith for his portrayal in this episode. And then, of course, Otto Hightower being a complete jerk. Somebody nobody likes. I think he did a very good job of that in this scene as well, so kudos to the showrunners for making sure we got the essence of Otto Hightower and his phallic tendencies. And then Mysaria, I think they got her right in this scene as well. A great intro to her, some sex, maybe the sex wasn't that necessary, but this scene when she's talking to him, talking him up, inflating his ego, I thought it was masterful, so kudos to both actors in that scene. And then I really liked in the tourney scenes where they had the ladies give their favor. That was really good. It stays true to some of the tourneys we hear about in the books in various stages, so I really liked that. And then, calling out the queen who never was in front of Viserys, that was bold. And I'm sure there were some bold knights out there, so I think that was a really good scene as well. And then the introduction of Criston Cole, pretty well done. They show that Rhaenyra has some interest in him from an early age. That's pretty cool. And then, of course, Daemon choosing to joust the Hightower, also very cool. It's no secret, and they make it obvious here that Otto and Daemon are arch enemies, and Daemon choosing to first joust against the Hightower on the mark. Daemon aiming at the horse's legs, I think that was kind of cartoonish. I think they were trying to make him out to be something similar to the Mountain That Rides in the first Game of Thrones book. He's not. He's a completely different character, so I think this was kind of silly. They should have just had him win the joust. He's certainly someone that might bend the rules, but sticking your lance into the horse's legs, that wouldn't even have worked. So yeah, he would have been knocked off his horse before his lance hit the horse. So that was just stupid. And then the mixing of the blood and guts and the jousting and the bed, I think they got that wrong. And then the jarring sound effects. Guys, make the sound pleasing, make it something that makes us want to watch. Don't make it something that makes us want to cover our ears. I think all the screaming in the birthing bed was traumatizing as well. So a lot of people say they like those scenes. I'm not a fan. And then obviously the murder on the tourney field, that was stupid. It's not with the books, and I don't quite understand why. I mean, it's one thing to force slaves to be in murder pits in Meereen. That at least has some semblance of truth. Just knights in not times of war just going out and knowing that one of the two wasn't going to make it through the joust. That doesn't speak of realism at all. That speaks of somebody wanting to make film in an unrealistic way. So, yeah, definitely got that wrong, I think. Emma being murdered, again, I think it was very traumatizing to watch, so I would not have done it this way. Clearly the patriarchy was there in Viserys making the decision. I would not have done it this way. I would have had Viserys bring Rhaenyra over to at least tell her, for her and Emma to know and be able to say their goodbyes. I think Viserys was somebody who wanted to please people, and I think he had some emotional intelligence, and I don't think he would have done this. So I think they got that wrong. But, some people liked the way they did it. It obviously shows the negative aspects of the patriarchy, and I'm sure that's what they were going for. And then Daemon fighting Criston Cole, again, great fight scene. The fact that he's using a Valyrian steel sword and Criston Cole's using a flail, I find that kind of comically unrealistic in a tourney setting again. But that's what the showrunners decided to do. I wouldn't have done it that way. So then, in the funeral, I think the touching scene between Daemon and Rhaenyra was really well done. Some people were suggesting that he was already grooming Rhaenyra in this point. I don't think that's what the showrunners were going for, and I don't think that's what George R. R. Martin was going for this early in Rhaenyra's life. I think it was just showing an uncle loving his niece and trying to make her feel better with the loss of both her brother and her mother. So I think both actors just nailed it, so I don't think there was any grooming going on. I think Daemon was just trying to be a good uncle here. And then Viserys disagreeing with their characterization of his brother, I think was also spot on. I think that's the type of thing he would actually have stood up for up until the point when he was given that information about the brothel scene. I think it's interesting they got Daemon's reaction to it, and Daemon could see that Viserys was taking his side and probably appreciated that, but he chuckled, of course, that Viserys would say he didn't have designs on the Iron Throne. Certainly he wanted that. But he wouldn't have done it over Viserys' dead body, at least in any way where he caused Viserys' dead body. So I think they had that right, and that was a really good scene. So I guess they probably got the request for them to change the heir right. And then, of course, Corlys is going to stand up for his wife and his son and their claim. So I'm glad they got that into that scene. And Viserys standing up for himself for once in his life. I think they got that right, too. He calls the council crows that are coming to feast on the corpses of his dead son and wife. And I think he's right in his opinion of the council. The rest of the council is a bunch of crows just kind of pecking at him. So very well done there. With Otto sending a raven to Old Town, they're showing the Old Town Maester conspiracy again. So really well done in showing that interaction between the Hightowers and the Maesters here. They leave the faith out of it, though. We haven't seen any Septas or Septons in this yet, so yeah, mostly got that right. The faith should be part of that. And then, I think the whole thing of Daemon saying we must all mourn in our own way, I think they got really close to the actual truth, at least the truth in my head canon, that Daemon probably was actually mourning the situation. Again, Matt Smith really did both this scene with Viserys and the scene in the brothel where he actually said heir for a day. I think they really got that. And then he goes on, to call Otto Hightower out for what he is. He's a schemer. He's not somebody who's got the good of the realm in mind. He's got his own ambitions and the ambitions of his family, the Hightowers, in his mind, not the Targaryens and certainly not Viserys. And then Daemon says that he would protect the king as his hand. I think he means that. Now, would he be a great hand? Probably not, but he would have been better for House Targaryen than Otto Hightower was. But then he goes too far. He calls Viserys weak, and he's right. But that's not politics. You don't just take the guy who has all the power and tell him he's powerless, because then he's going to actually go and flex those muscles and show, I actually do have power and I'm not weak. So then he tells Daemon that he is no longer going to be his heir. So then we get the scene with his chosen heir, Rhaenyra, before the actual ceremony. And he talks about controlling dragons, and you get some depth of character for Viserys in this scene with Rhaenyra that you don't get in the book. So I think they really got this right as well. Considine, the actor, kudos to him for bringing that. I think he brought a lot of that from what I read. He's the one who brought this character to life. Kudos to Paddy Considine. And of course, that's also the scene where we get the prophecy from Aegon about the others and dragon needing to be there. Of course, Daenerys being the dragon that was there in the end, although obviously the way Game of Thrones came out, we didn't get the heroism that they seem to think Aegon had seen. So hopefully in the books we get a slightly better ending, and one that shows how essential the Targaryens would be in the fight against ice and the Song of Ice and Fire. So then they're kind of introducing Daemon leaving town. They introduce Caraxes, his dragon. They show that the dragon is kind of fierce and maybe a little uncontrollable, or at least not under control. In fact, I'd go so far as to say Caraxes is a reflection of his rider, and that's the bard's truth. They show him having to calm the dragon just so it can be ridden, and I think that's a really cool touch there. So in the end, this was House of the Dragon, and it sure was a good start. Really didn't like some of the things in the middle with the birthing scene and with the deaths during the tourney. I thought that comical, but a good start and a little bit exhausting. But I'm excited to see some of these episodes coming up later this season. So that's House of the Dragon. That's The Bard's Truth. Thanks a lot.
Thanks to all the terrific artists who let me use their work on this YouTube video. Thanks especially to those in my family who helped in this series so far. If you enjoy this content, you can also consider supporting us on Patreon.